Imagine the world is ending, but there is no fire, no invaders, no screaming. There is only silence. The year is 2181 BCE. You were standing in the shadow of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's the tallest structure on the planet, a mountain of white limestone polished so bright it hurts to look at. To you, this isn't history, it's your world, it's eternal. But look closer. The Nile, the heartbeat of the world, hasn't risen in years. The grain stores are empty. The Pharaoh, the living god who promised you the sun would rise, is a frail old man hiding behind palace walls. And then, the unthinkable happens. The neighbors you've known for decades, they're looking at your children with a hunger that isn't for friendship. History books call it the first intermediate period of Egypt, a dry academic name for a time of chaos, famine, and the political fragmentation of one of the world's earliest great civilizations. They tell you it was a transition. They tell you it was a phase. But for those living through it, it was the end of the universe. What happened to the Old Kingdom wasn't just a change in leadership. It was a warning, a psychological and physical breakdown of a society that thought it was too big to fail. And the most terrifying part? It didn't happen because of a war. It happened because of a shift in the earth that is happening again right now. If you want to understand how a superpower vanishes, you need to see what happened when the sun finally set on the pyramids. Because what they found in the tombs isn't just gold, it's a mirror. For centuries, Egypt functioned as a highly centralized state, built around the divine authority of the Pharaoh. He wasn't just a king, he was Ma'at, the physical anchor of the universe. But perfection is a trap. By the end of the 6th dynasty, the gears were grinding. Pepi II Neferkare may have ruled for more than 90 years, one of the longest reigns in human history. As his body withered, the absolute power of the central government withered with him. But while the aging pharaoh was busy building monuments to his own immortality, the sky was changing. Modern climate scientists studying sediments in the Nile Delta discovered evidence of a massive global drought around 2200 BCE. This was the 4.2 kiloyear event, a sudden, catastrophic climate crisis that choked the world's first empires. The rain stopped. The Nile failed to flood, not just for a season, for a lifetime. But the drought wasn't the most terrifying thing that happened in Egypt. What people began doing to survive would shock even modern historians. What happens to a society that worships a god of water when the water vanishes? The answer is written on the walls of a tomb in Moala. It's a message left by a local governor named Ankhtfi, and it contains a sentence that should haunt your sleep. Ankhtfi wrote that the famine was so severe that every man was eating his own children. While historians today believe this may be a dramatic exaggeration meant to show how desperate the times were, the psychological reality remains. The living God in the capital could no longer feed his people. But this horrifying line is not the most disturbing discovery archaeologists made. What they later found inside royal monuments revealed something even darker. The social contract was dead. When people stop believing in the system, they don't just protest, they erase it. The elite had spent generations convincing peasants that the pharaoh was the only path to the afterlife. But when your stomach is screaming, you realize a terrifying truth. The god is bleeding. And if he can bleed, he can be killed. The collapse wasn't a slow slide, it was an explosion. Archaeologists have found smashed statues of kings and broken royal monuments across Old Kingdom sites. In some places, the noses of statues were systematically chiseled off, an attempt to kill the soul of the king so he couldn't breathe in the afterlife. They weren't just destroying stone, they were killing eternity.
But the real question is this: who started the rebellion first? The starving people or the powerful men inside the government? The most dangerous man in a failing empire isn't the rebel at the gates. It's the bureaucrat who realizes the boss is no longer in charge. Local governors, the nomarchs, stopped sending taxes to the capital. They realized something revolutionary. They didn't need a king. And once that idea spread across Egypt, the empire shattered. Nomarchs became warlords, building private armies and turning Egypt into a fractured wasteland of walled cities and midnight raids. Imagine a modern superpower suddenly waking up to find the central government has evaporated. No supply chains, no safety. Just your town and whoever has the most grain.
Then archaeologists discovered something chilling. A text buried in the ruins of Egypt describing a world that had completely fallen apart. Today, historians call it the Admonitions of Ipuwer. The river is blood, the text claims. The desert is spread throughout the land. Noble ladies say, "Oh, that we had something to eat." This was the great leveling. The rich were hunted. Sacred tombs were ripped open, not just for gold, but for revenge. But something strange happened in the darkness. The Egyptians didn't just collapse, they changed what it meant to be human. In earlier times, afterlife rituals were reserved for kings and elites. But after the collapse, something revolutionary appeared: the coffin texts. Ordinary Egyptians painted these once royal spells on their own coffins. For the first time in history, the afterlife became democratic. It was the birth of individualism, born from the ashes of a failed state. But the most haunting question isn't how Egypt collapsed. It's how close the entire civilization came to disappearing forever. The fragmentation lasted more than a century. 7 generations were born into a world where the state was a myth and safety was a memory. We look at the pyramids and ask how they were built, but the real mystery is why the system that built them failed. The Old Kingdom didn't fall because they ran out of stones. It fell because a rigid society refused to adapt to a changing climate. The ruins of Giza aren't just a tourist destination, they are a mirror. We live in a global society that relies on perfect weather and infinite growth. And just like the Egyptians, we are often blind to the shifts beneath our feet. Egypt eventually rose again. A new dynasty took power, but the innocence was gone. They knew from that moment on that the world could end. So ask yourself, if the pharaohs of our modern world vanished, who would you become? The one writing the warnings or the one being hunted in the dark? There are stories in history that stay hidden because they remind us how thin the ice is. Next week, we uncover the one civilization that disappeared so completely that historians only realized it existed after digging through miles of desert. And what they found buried there might change everything we think we know about ancient history. You don't want to be left in the dark when that story breaks. Subscribe before the sand